Thank you, folks, for your faithfulness. Well, we have a gentleman in our upstairs room doing some translation this morning, and I am so grateful for the work that he is doing very much behind the scenes. The plexiglass that is in front of him is in case he makes mistakes, you can't hit him with tomatoes. And actually, I think it's more to protect me from him so that if I say something wrong, he doesn't go after me. So, I have a video that I would like to show you this morning. So, Carrie, if you could put that up for me. I guess we won't play that one this morning. Wasn't that great? It was awesome. All right, for the next few weeks, we're going to look at the book of Joshua. Now, I mentioned last week that this man was a biblical hero of mine, and I believe that this book has some lessons for us as we move into this new season. Oh yes, I'm supposed to dismiss the kids because Renee's in her big yellow shirt with the big eyes on it. So kids, you are welcome to go with Renee this morning. Don't be afraid of the face on her shirt. It just means she's watching you. All right. So I'm starting into a series on Joshua, and I've entitled this series Lessons from a General. For those of you who have a military bent, like Gordy here, he will appreciate the fact that the general is going to do more than just, the saying from Harry Belafonte. Have you ever heard that song, Old King Cole by Harry Belafonte? Where the general, duh. No, this general has more to say than just, duh. So we're going to learn from the general of God. We're going to take a look at Joshua chapters 1 and 2 this morning. Before we do that, we're going to pray. Father, your word needs to be more than just words that we hear. It needs to be something that we apply in our lives. Your word in James says, do not be hearers only, and so deceive yourselves, but be doers of the word. So Lord, I'm asking your Holy Spirit to come and move in this room today. Maybe there are some walls that need to come down. Maybe there are some character traits that need to be addressed. Maybe there are some habits that need to be broken. But whatever it is, God, I pray that we would learn from what Joshua has to say to us. Because this is time-tested advice from thousands of years of experience. And I pray, God, that you would just apply it to our lives and do the work in us that only you can do. In Jesus' name, amen. Let me tell you about this man named Joshua. Joshua was Moses' aide, basically his gopher. And he started doing that when he was still a youth. I mean, he was about the age of Cooper when he started serving Moses. We don't know why he got drafted into this position. I'm thinking that the benefits might have outweighed the salary, but we're not told that he got anything for this other than probably a good swift kick in the butt every now and then by Moses. And we know that Moses was a little bit quick with the stick, if you know what I mean. He shadowed Moses. He worked for Moses. He did whatever he was asked to do, and there is no mention of him ever refusing, complaining, or objecting to what God was doing. He was passionate for the Lord. And we know that because in Exodus 33:11, we read this. It says that the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. And then Moses would return to the camp, but his young aide Joshua, the son of Nun, he did not leave the tent. This young man wouldn't leave the place where God was. He saw Moses talking to the Lord face to face, and he wanted that intimacy too. How many of you know that following after somebody who has left big shoes is hard to fill? It is. It's hard to fill those big shoes. Now, I don't think anyone has ever tried to fill shoes like Moses' shoes. Can you imagine trying to follow the man who brought them out of Egypt? Joshua saw Moses bring the plagues of against Egypt. He saw water out of the rock not once but twice. He saw manna from heaven. He saw the splitting of the Red Sea. He saw quail come into the camp. That was Moses' resume. Colton, wouldn't you love to be able to pad a resume like that? Yeah, hire me because I bring water out of rocks. I'm sure we can find a nice place for you in the middle of Nevada. Sometimes stepping into the next that God has for you involves following after someone else. The first church that I pastored actually was the easiest. I followed in the footsteps of someone who did an okay job. The expectations weren't high. The hurts weren't high. It was just kind of, come on in, we're okay, you're okay, everything's okay. But when I got to Stettler, I was following after a pastor who had severely abused his position for financial and personal gain. I had community relationships to restore and drastic hurts to overcome. You would think that would be easy to follow in the footsteps of a disaster, but it actually took years to regain the trust of both the community and the church. One of my first days in Stettler, I went walking down the street and I walked into a real estate office because we were looking for a house. And the guy was all friendly to start with until I told him where I worked. And then he got out of his seat and he pointed to the door and he said, "You get out of my office and don't ever come back." And that was the first of 4 businesses that kicked me out that same day because of the former pastor's reputation. There were some hard shoes to fill. And then I went to pastor in a church where the former pastor served faithfully for more than 20 years. And you all know him. He left big shoes to fill. So in many ways, this message is not for you this morning. It's for me. That being said, let me tell you 3 lessons from General Joshua's experience on moving into the next stage. The first lesson is found in chapter 1 of this book, and it's this: embrace the new. Joshua begins with the announcement that Moses, my servant, is dead. It's kind of final, don't you think, Billy? It's quickly followed by the words, "Now then." How many of you know that when God says that, you need to take a deep breath and get ready to move? It's true. When God goes, "Wayne, now then," you're going to have to jump. You might have to say how high on the way up. God is not leaving any room for wondering or questioning if Moses was going to come back down that mountain. Joshua, stop staring up the mountain. He's dead. Joshua, the old door is shut. It's time for you to step up. Now, please understand, Joshua has been the general of the army under Moses, but now he is being promoted, and he's not being asked if he wants this position or not. Look at verses 2 and 6. It says this: "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them." Do you see what God does in these verses? He tells Joshua the old door is shut. He appoints Joshua to a new role. He gives him a green light to move forward. And then he gives Joshua an incredible promise. But notice one thing here, please. He's telling. He's not asking. He is telling Joshua that he's the number one now. He's telling them to get ready to move. He's telling them that they will take the land. He's telling them that he will be with them. We need to get this. God is in charge. And when he is calling you to move forward, it is not a, "Hey, Joe, do you wanna?" It's a march. And how does Joshua respond? How does this man react to this news that his mentor is dead, that he's being promoted, and being told to march into the unknown? Well, look at verses 10 and 11. It says this. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. The first thing that we hear come out of Joshua's mouth is a command to the leaders under him. Contrast that with what Moses did at the fiery bush. In Exodus 3 and 4, he responds to God. God says, I'm calling you. And Moses asks 4 questions that every parent knows oh so well. Who am I? That's in chapter 3, verse 11. Who are you? Chapter 3, verse 13. What if? Chapter 4, verse 1. And our favorite one of all. Why me? In 4:13. Joshua jumped when God spoke, but Moses, he tried to make excuses. But that's where the benefit comes in of serving Moses all those years. Joshua had a foundation to stand on. He had watched God come through time after time after time. He had watched the miraculous happen. He had heard the thunder from the mountain. He experienced the Red Sea. He knew that God stood behind what he said. So when God said, get ready, Joshua said, yes, sir. Now I want to bring this home in your life. Nowhere does God say that the next stage will be easy. It won't. Nowhere does he say that it will be comfortable. It won't. Nowhere does he promise that you won't face struggles and battles. God doesn't promise those things because he knows they will come, and God doesn't lie. But listen to what God does say in Joshua chapter 1, verses 3 to 5. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, from the Euphrates to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Do you hear that promise? Does it sound familiar? It should. Because in Matthew 28, 19 and 20, Jesus said, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. Here it is. Surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. Do you see the similarities? I will give you territory, and I will be with you. You're being commissioned like Joshua. You are being called to embrace the new. On Tuesday, as I mentioned, a few of our men went door to door asking if they could pray for people. They were uncomfortable. They were being stretched. But Wayne, did they get blessed? Amen. They were embracing the new. If you don't get out of the old, you can't experience what's coming. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always had. It's a definition of stupidity. It is. That's not going forward. And God tells us plainly in Hebrews 12, verse 1, throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. How many of you have been watching the Olympics? A couple of people. Have you ever watched a 100-yard dash? Hands up if you have. All right, how many of you have ever seen the 100-yard dash backwards? Yeah, I didn't think so. There's no Olympic game where you have to run backwards. Because that's not a race, that's just silliness. We're called to run the race. That means you have to go forward. You have to go forward, not stay still. We have to embrace the new because that's part of what moving into the next stage is all about. The second lesson is this: examine the direction. In the first verse of Joshua chapter 2, we see Joshua start to make plans. It says this, then Joshua the son of Nun secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. Go and look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. 2 questions for you today. Why Jericho, and why does this seem familiar? Well, in answer to the second question, The scene seems familiar because 40 years ago, Joshua was one of the 2 spies sent into the land to spy it out. Well, he was one of the 2 that came back and gave a positive report. 12 spies went in. He was one of the only 2 who came back and said, "We can do it!" Everyone else said, big boys, big giants, big problems. What were they saying? Small God. They died in the wilderness. The rest made excuses for why it was an impossible task. Joshua and Caleb said, "We can do it." So here we see Joshua following the example that Moses laid for him so long ago, but he's learned. I'm not going to send 12. Because, Gordy, how hard is it to get a consensus of 12? Yeah, God doesn't work by committee, folks. Praise God. So he sent 2. Go and seek out the land, but especially Jericho. Why? Well, Jericho was the first fortified city that they were going to encounter, and historical reconstruction based on archaeology has the city looking something like this. Does that look like something you want to leave behind you? And its walls would have looked something like this from the side. From the ground looking up, the top of that top wall was more than 40 feet up in the air. 4 stories. This was not a city you could afford to leave standing behind you. This was not a conquest that was within the ability of untrained Israel to take. They had no siege engines. They had no catapults. They had no way to get up 46 feet without being slaughtered by the soldiers on those walls. But Joshua knew that this city was vital to the conquest in front of them, so he sent people to check it out. This is common sense. But it's also godly wisdom in action. You don't move forward without a plan. As Jesus said in Luke 14:31 and 32, suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he's able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he's not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. When God is calling you into the next stage, part of the process of obedience is to do your homework. And all the parents said, "Oh, no, I'm done with school." No, we have to do our homework too. Know where you're going. Do your recon. Find out the obstacles. These are all practical steps that Joshua performed. He knew which city to scope out. He sent men to do just that, and he knew from the recon that he received that he would be able to determine the obstacles to their advancement. When Micah and I got called here, we spoke with another pastor who had made the transition from the land of the freeze to the home of the brave. Okay? We did our homework. We did some recon, and we understood the obstacles, or we thought we did. And even with all of that, it has not been an easy transition into a new land. But trying to do that without information, can you imagine showing up at the border with a truckload of stuff and going, "I'm moving down to the States"? They'd look at you and go, "Oh, no, you're not." Excuse me, sir, the way back to Canada is that way. Go now. But no. If you don't have the stuff lined up, if you don't have everything you need, you're not going to do it. Tell me, when was the last time that you sat down and prayerfully figured out your map for the next 3 to 5 years? When was the last time that you went to prayer and listened to God's instructions on where you're going, the challenges you'll face, and the obstacles that'll be in your way? When was the last time that you sat down and strategized about how you're going to take the land that God has called you into? You see, each of us has been strategically placed where we are by a God who longs to reach people. How are you going to do that? What methods are you going to use? If you have a neighbor with a peanut allergy, please don't bring them peanut butter cookies. Unless you want them to meet Jesus real fast. Who are you going to focus on? What people group are you specifically aiming for? You have to examine the direction as you move into the next stage. It's one of the reasons why we asked Michael to start the Hispanic services, is we know that the Hispanic community is growing in Watertown, and my Spanish is horrible. I know enough to get me into a lot of trouble fast. But Michael can communicate. And it's really hard to spread the gospel if you can't communicate. The final lesson is this: extend the gospel. I want you to read the first few verses in chapter 2 because people miss the gospel when they read the Old Testament. In verses 12 and 13, it says this. Joshua chapter 2, 12 and 13, it says this: "Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, that you will save us from death." This is the prostitute. This is Rahab. The spies did not go in and go, "Hey, we're going to go and find the people who are upright and righteous. We're not going to go and find the popular people in town." Why? Because social media of the day would have let everybody know real quick they've got visitors. So they went and stayed with Rahab the prostitute because, well, what happens in a prostitute's house stays in a prostitute's house. But it still got back to the king. And here Rahab is begging, is pleading. I know God is going to give you this city. I know God's going to give you this land. Please spare my family. Do you hear the cry of the desperation? If we whittle down all of the words of what she said, what she's really saying is this: save me. She's asking them to save her from death. Now, isn't that the cry of the lost in the true form? Isn't that the cry of the homeless vet on the corner who says, "Save me"? Isn't that the cry of the addict who wants to change? "Save me." Isn't that the cry of the woman whose husband has walked out and left her with nothing? And here we see the cry of Rahab is exactly the same: save me. Look at verse 14. Our lives for your lives. The men assured her, "If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land." There it is. That's the gospel according to Joshua. Right there. Sean, I don't see it. I know, it's a bit fuzzy. You may need to wipe the "this is not how the gospel looks" off your glasses, but it is right there. Let me explain. Our lives for your lives is the substitutionary aspect of the cross. Jesus gave his life for our life. If you don't tell what we're doing is the faith element. The statement is basically saying, if you believe in your heart, it's the spies saying, "Rahab, if you truly believe that our God has given the land into our hands, it's the whoever believes in him shall not perish part of the story. And here is the promise: we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land." This is the same as Jesus saying, "Today you will be with me in paradise." This is the gospel. All of the elements are right there. Romans 10:10 says, "For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified. It's your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved." Rahab believed in her heart that God had given this people the city of Jericho. Rahab confessed with her mouth. She asked for salvation. The only difference, folks, is that in the Old Testament, the people had to look at the nation of Israel in order to see the foretold Messiah. We get to look at him face to face. Rahab was the recipient of the gospel in this chapter, but it's the spies who offer it to her. They could have told her no. They could have pulled out a Jewish form of the Islamic teaching of taqiyya, which allows Muslim believers to lie to unbelievers to achieve a goal. But they didn't. Instead, they understood that Israel was called to be a light to the world, not darkness covering it. We have to understand that God calling you into the next stage is all about the gospel. It's all about advancing the kingdom. Yes, God is moving you forward for your ultimate good and for his glory. But in John chapter 15, verse 8, Jesus said this. He said, "This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples." Now, the mission statement of this church is to see God's glory and God's glory in us. How? Right there. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit. God is glorified when we produce fruit, and that is all about the gospel. When you go to work and you show someone the love of Christ, you're expanding the gospel. When someone hurts you and you forgive them, you are extending the gospel. When you share a verse with someone or tell them about your faith, you are extending the gospel. When someone is hurting and you give them comfort, you're extending the gospel. Everything we do is about extending the gospel because we're enlisting in the Lord's army, and his army is advancing the kingdom of God. Cecil was driving people the other night. Part of driving was driving people down to that event downtown, wasn't it, Cecil? Cecil bought a hat on Monday night when he and I and Michael were at this prophetic ministry, and the hat says, "Christ offering forgiveness for everyone every day." Coffee, full lead, not decaf. That'll keep you awake for eternity. Fantastic. But that's extending the gospel. He doesn't have to ram it down their throats. He doesn't have to turn around and confront them in his truck, lock the doors and go, "Ha, ha, ha, captive audience, repent, you sinner." He doesn't have to do that. Because that's not extending the gospel, that's extending our version of the gospel. But extending the gospel is when we show people the love of Jesus, even if we don't agree with them. Listen to the cries around you, because often the cry of "save me" is phrased very differently. It could be phrased as, "Scott, my life is in the pits. Wayne, I'm just so tired. Holly, I just need something to go my way. Jan, if only I could stop time for a minute. Rod, I feel so alone." All of those cries are variations of "save me," from people who don't know what they need, but they know they need something. Listen with your ears and then extend the gospel with the hands of Jesus. When I teach classes on self-defense, one of the first things that I tell people is to work on their situational awareness. What do I mean? Well, don't ever walk into an alley without first looking to see if there's somebody in the alley. That seems to make common sense, but you'd be amazed how many people forget that. "Oh, look, here's a shortcut. Creepy alley, but that's okay." You examine the sounds. You feel if things are off. When you walk out of a building, you look around, not just to see what's outside, but to see where people are and what's going on and if there's something that is off. A lot of muggings could be prevented if people took a moment to evaluate their direction before they jumped in with both feet. God is calling us into the next stage, and it would be wise of us to carefully plan and evaluate what's out there, who is our target audience, how we're going to accomplish our task, and what the steps are to accomplish that task. This is not disobedience, this is biblical. In Joshua 1, we read that God said, "Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan." God said, "Get ready." Joshua didn't. God said to plan well. And to us, God is saying, "Get ready." I want you to think about it this way. Many of you know the promise found in Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a future and a hope." How many of you like that verse? Yep, a few hands are up and the rest of you are lying. Okay, anyway, we'll talk about repentance later. But this is the same God who says, "Call to me, and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things that you do not know," in Jeremiah 33:3. He knows the plans. He is prepared and ready. But we need to know his plans, and to do that, we have to call on him in prayer and listen to him in prayer. This is God's kingdom that we're advancing, so we have to do it God's way. In fact, there's even a warning found in Isaiah chapter 30, verse 1. It's a warning that's given to those who try to do God's stuff our way. It says, "Woe to the obstinate children," declares the Lord, "to those who carry out plans that are not mine, forming an alliance, but not by my spirit, heaping sin upon sin." That's frightening. I know an awful lot of churches that make decisions and directions based on leadership rules of the day. But we have a leader, and it's not the smart aleck who's preaching right now. The guy in charge is a lot bigger than me. He doesn't make mistakes. I do. Ask my wife. Or ask my kids. They'll tell you, I make them all the time. Yep, Danny, I see that thumbs up, and I raise you and you're grounded. Okay. His plans may not seem to make sense. But when they don't make sense in those instances, we have to remember what the Lord says in Isaiah 55:8. He says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord." He is God and we're not. His vantage point allows him to see everything. We only see now. He's all powerful and we are needy. Let me tell you an illustration that I just read actually from a missionary in Brazil. A widow with 2 small children was penniless, and there was no food in the house. Some of you can relate to this. So she went to prayer, and she heard God's Spirit say, "I want you to go to this grocery store, get 2 months of food in your basket, and go to checkout line number 7. Now, the grocery store that she was told to go to was large, 60 checkout lines, 60. When she heaped her cart full and she went to checkout line number 7, just like God told her, when the person ahead of her finished, the cashier closed the till to go for lunch. She was told to go to another line. She said, "No, my father told me to come to this line. I'll wait for it to open." How many of you like waiting? That's kind of what I thought. Half an hour later, the cashier comes back and they begin scanning her items. She has a lot of items, right? 2 months worth of food. When they get to the end, she still has no money. This is a little bit of a problem. But just as that was about to become an issue, an announcement was made on the speaker system. "Ladies and gentlemen, to celebrate 7 years open for business, all groceries rung through until 7 today are free." 2 months of food. $0. We do not know the things that God knows. We do not see the things that God sees. We do not feel the things that God feels. So we have to move into the next stage by embracing the new. You can't embrace the new if you're still holding on tight to the old. God has better in store for you, but to get the new, you need to surrender the old. I want you to look at this picture. I love this picture. Jesus won't make you give it up. But you risk losing out on the better if you cling to the familiar. That's how we've always done it. It needs to be replaced with, who are we going to reach by doing it this way? Examine the direction. Scripture is very clear about testing the Spirit behind everything and anything. Don't take my word for it. Test it back against Scripture. If the direction we lay out is not aimed the way God is aimed, then we need to go God's way. Let's do this the right way, carefully, strategically, and faithfully, because souls are on the line. And we do this by extending the gospel. Everything has to be about souls. A friend of mine, his name is Bob Jones. He pastors a church up in Edmonton. He had a church of 2,500 people, and they moved to a different location in Edmonton, and the church grew up to 4,000 people. Well, our district started doing this church revitalization process, and during the process, Bob Jones, he was the first one to sign up for it. He's like, "Examine my church. Is there something we can do better?" And what it came down to is, he said, we had 40 people saved one year. in a church of 4,000. He said, that is not acceptable. Bare minimum, we want to see 400 souls every year. We want to see 10% new growth every year. So he said, what are we going to do? And they went through and they reevaluated every ministry in the church to make sure that souls were the priority. Because you see, folks, my Father is glorified in this, that we bear much fruit. God doesn't want you to grow one apple. He wants you to have an orchard. He doesn't want you to have one grape. He wants you to have clusters of grapes. He wants us to bear much fruit. We've seen 24 souls saved since the start of January. That's a drop in the bucket. I'm grateful for the drop, but I want to see the bucket full. I want you to pardon the example I'm going to give, but the church building and the church people were meant to be like a fishing lure. We're shiny, we're attractive, and so desirable that the unsaved have to bite on it and become a part of it. Now, I'm not going to carry that analogy through because we're not going to pull them into the boat and beat them. Roger? No. But this is why Jesus preached on hillsides. That's why God does the miraculous. That's why salvation is grace-based and not work-based. God is trying to attract people, and that attraction is so that the gospel can be proclaimed and received. General Joshua has lessons for us to learn because he learned them through blood, sweat, and tears. And we have to learn from him because he is a successful example that the Lord has left for us. But the biggest lesson that the general would have us learn is this: you have to be in the camp to be saved. In order for Rahab to be saved, she had to be willing to leave the safety of Jericho. She had to leave the culture that she knew. She had to leave the gods that she served to become a part of the Israelite camp. She had to embrace their God to be embraced by their God. Hear me today, the same is true. You can't get a blessing from Jesus until first you come into the camp of Jesus. John 3:16 lays it out very clearly. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever, everyone say whoever, believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Love is the motivation. The world is the direction, but Jesus is the salvation. You must be saved by Jesus to receive blessings from Jesus. Please, if you haven't already, give your heart and life to Jesus today. Let's pray. Father, this morning, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I don't know where hearts are at here. I don't know what lives are like when they go home. I don't know what the home life is like. I don't know what the character life is like. I don't know what the work life is like. Really, Father, I stand up here in complete ignorance of what people do when they go home. But you see all. You hear all. And nothing is hidden from you. You know it all. So Lord, I'm asking this morning that we would bow our hearts and our knees to you in faith. We need to come into the camp of Christ if we want to receive the blessings from Christ. Jesus says, I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a future and a hope. But that is entirely conditional on whoever believes in him shall not perish but come to everlasting life. If we don't believe, we can't receive. So Lord, I'm asking this morning, if anyone is here today and you've never given your life to Jesus, and it's time, you need to make that step of faith. I want you to just raise your hand today so that I can pray for you. Hallelujah. Father, I pray this morning that your Spirit would work in the hearts of each one here. That being fruitful would be our goal, because that's what brings God glory. That you would help us, Father, to embrace the new, because sometimes it's scary. I'm sure that folks in this church have wondered a few times since I've been here, oh Lord, what is this guy doing? And that's just my wife on a morning. Father, I pray right now that you would help us to embrace the new. You would help us to examine the direction. You would help us to extend the gospel, because you're calling us into the next stage and we need to be ready to move. So Lord, give us this city for Jesus. Give us 1,000 souls to start. And then we'll pray for 10,000. God, it'd be great if we could even reach all the way to Washington, D.C., because heaven knows they need Jesus. Lord, do your work, your way. We will follow your Spirit, and we will give you the glory. And everybody said, Amen. Amen. May God bless you. May he make his face to shine upon you. May you stand in the glory of the radiance of the face of the Son of God. When John saw that, he fell face down as though dead. So put away the idea that, hey, when I get to heaven, I'm going to go and give Jesus a high five. Maybe after you figure out if you're going to scrape your face off the floor or not. Because our God is no longer the nice little baby in the manger. Our God is no longer the nice little Lamb of God. Our God is no longer the man who suffered on the cross. Our God is now the soon-coming conquering king, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And what comes out of his mouth is the sword of the Spirit. It divides both bone and marrow. So may you stand in the light of his face. Because in his face, when you're standing in that light, sin runs. The devil runs. The darkness of this world runs. And you just want more of him. And that's my prayer for you today, is that in everything you do, you just want more of Jesus. God bless you. Have a great week.